3 violins hit the first icy notes, then freeze. People whip their heads around. Something is happening, but nobody knows what. And that's exactly when the echo of Paris begins to change. It started as a normal winter evening outside Galeries Lafayette, where shoppers rushed through glowing trees and red ribbons. The cold air was filled with chatter, footsteps, the hiss of buses, nothing unusual. Until one young violinist, wearing a thick blue scarf, stepped forward and played the iconic opening of Carol of the Bells. Her bow trembled the air. Her sound sliced straight through the noise. And instantly a ripple spread through the crowd. People slowed down. Heads turned. Phones lifted. Then, another violinist appeared from the opposite side of the plaza. He matched her melody perfectly, note for note, like they'd rehearsed 1,000 times, except none of the bystanders had any idea what was coming. On the third repetition of the theme, a deep, resonant cello tone rolled across the open space. A man in a black coat stepped out from behind the Christmas tree arch, his eyes focused, bow gliding like winter wind across the strings. The crowd gasped. 3 musicians, seemingly strangers, now playing a perfect harmony. And then, from the balcony above, 4 choir singers began humming a haunting overtone. Their voices floated down like snow, soft, mysterious, mesmerizing. A few children grabbed their parents' arms, pointing upward. "What is happening?" someone whispered. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Because hidden in the shadows of the building pillars, behind buses, inside cafes, and scattered through the street, over 100 musicians were waiting for their exact cue. The violinist in the blue scarf turned, raised her bow high, and sliced the air like a conductor. That was the signal. Suddenly, brass exploded from every direction. Trumpets, trombones, and French horns burst into the iconic rhythmic chant of the song. Tourists screamed. Locals froze. The plaza transformed into a massive, living sound chamber. And the flash mob had officially begun. The brass hit so hard that pigeons scattered into the sky. People shouted, not in fear, but in shock. Because the sound wasn't just loud, it was everywhere at once. For 3 full seconds, the plaza felt like it was vibrating. The trumpets led the charge, firing the main Carol of the Bells motif with bright, golden energy. Trombonists leaned back and blasted harmonies that made jackets flutter. French horns added a regal warmth that wrapped around the buildings like a glowing ribbon. And the crowd? They were losing their minds. A little girl on her father's shoulders squealed. "More! More!" A couple that had just walked out of a cafe stopped mid-sip, coffee spilling onto the sidewalk as they stared wide-eyed. Even the security guard, who was jogging toward the commotion, slowed down, jaw dropping as the full brass section unfolded across the street. But then something magical happened. The musicians began moving. It wasn't chaotic. It wasn't random. It was choreographed. Trumpet players stepped forward in unison, forming a diagonal line down the plaza. Trombonists swung their slides simultaneously, creating a visual wave synchronized with the music. 2 French horn players climbed up short steps and elevated the melody from above like heralds calling across the city. And just when everyone thought the spectacle had peaked, a ripple of drums erupted. Snare drummers marched in from behind the Christmas market stalls, sticks spinning, creating a military-style cadence that electrified the air. A bass drum boomed like thunder, echoing between the buildings. People clapped instinctively, bodies drumming along without realizing it. The atmosphere turned cinematic, huge, bold, unstoppable. But hidden within that powerful sound was something even more unbelievable. Across the street, the enormous store windows of Galeries Lafayette suddenly lit up, not with normal holiday displays, but with bright red, blue, and gold animations that pulsed perfectly in time with the music. Bells, ribbons, snowflakes, and shooting lights danced across the glass. People screamed, pointing wildly. "How is this even real?" a tourist shouted. The answer revealed itself seconds later. Because behind those glowing windows, silhouettes began to appear. 1, 2, 10, 20. A full choir, lined up inside the store, pressed against the glass, ready to join. The brass hit a final sustained note, the drums rolled, and the lights synchronized for one explosive pause in the music. That pause was the cue. The choir inhaled, deep, powerful, unified. The choir's first note didn't sound human. It hit the glass so hard that the windows trembled. People clutched their chests, because the vibration went straight through them. The choir burst into the signature. Ding dong, ding dong. Harmony, their voices layered in rich, chilling precision. Even though they were behind glass, the sound pierced the plaza like a cathedral bell tower had opened above the city. Sopranos soared with icy clarity. Altos added warm, velvety depth. Tenors carried the melody with ringing confidence. And basses, deep and thunderous, made the ground feel alive. The crowd was hypnotized. Some held their phones so high their arms shook. Others just stared, mouths open, completely forgetting to record. A few elderly couples wiped tears, overwhelmed by the beauty of the sound echoing through the holiday night. But while the choir dominated the storefront, something else was happening behind the crowd. A string army emerged. 30 violinists. 10 cellists. 6 violas. All walking forward in a synchronized arc like the tide rolling in. The first chair violinist, a woman wearing a sparkling silver coat, stepped to the center. She lifted her bow high, so high the plaza lights glinted off it, and with a single sharp motion, she snapped the string section into action. Suddenly, the plaza transformed into a symphonic battlefield. The choir hammered the rhythmic chanting from behind the glass. The strings unleashed a fast, swirling counter-melody that lifted the entire piece into a rushing storm. The brass section held the foundation like a wall of gold sound. And the drummers drove the tempo with heart-pounding intensity. People didn't just hear the music, they were swallowed by it. Kids danced. Teens spun in circles. An old man raised his cane and conducted from a bench, laughing with pure joy. Just when the energy reached a blazing peak, the string leader moved her bow in a sweeping curve, an instruction the crowd didn't understand, but the musicians did. Instantly, the entire string section shifted into a new formation, creating a perfect semicircle around the plaza's center. A spotlight, hidden in the upper balcony, snapped on. It illuminated a single man standing alone, holding a baton. The real conductor had arrived. He inhaled slowly, eyes blazing with purpose. The conductor's baton dropped, and Paris felt the air tighten like a held breath. What came next wasn't music. It was a detonation of sound. The instant the baton sliced downward, the entire ensemble responded like one colossal organism. The strings attacked in a rapid-fire tremolo, bows shaking so fast they blurred. The brass section erupted with a heroic blast that ricocheted between the buildings. Drums thundered in a rolling avalanche that made people grab each other for balance. And then the choir behind the glass unleashed their full power. Their voices weren't just loud, they were monumental. The sopranos climbed impossibly high, ringing like crystal. The baritones roared with cathedral-deep resonance. Altos filled the middle with molten warmth. Basses struck so low it felt like the plaza floor hummed. The synergy was unreal. The conductor stepped into a tight, whirling pattern with his hands, his baton carving shapes in the cold air. He pushed the strings into a rapid crescendo. He pulled the brass into a burning harmony. He signaled the percussion to intensify. Every section responded instantly, as if linked to him by invisible wires. People in the crowd weren't just watching, they were transfixed. The man in the red scarf stopped mid-step, frozen. A street artist dropped her charcoal sketchbook. A group of tourists began crying without knowing why. And then the unthinkable happened. From the rooftops surrounding the plaza, towering speakers lit up with synchronized LEDs, turning vivid blue and gold. They weren't amplifying the musicians, they were harmonizing with them. A soft, ethereal choir pad filled the air, floating above the live voices, making the music feel unearthly. The conductor raised both arms high. Musicians braced themselves. Then, with a sudden flick, he forced the entire ensemble into a massive, dramatic silence. The crowd gasped. Parents instinctively pulled their kids closer. Even the pigeons stopped fluttering. For one long heartbeat, Paris stood suspended in a snow globe of stillness. Then, boom! The full ensemble exploded back in with the most powerful section of Carol of the Bells. Fireworks burst from the rooftop edges, short, controlled flashes of white and gold, timed perfectly with the beats. The plaza glowed as bursts lit up the sky, reflecting off glass, off instruments, off stunned faces. People screamed with joy. Phones shook from excitement. The conductor's cape whipped behind him as he drove the orchestra into a furious, unstoppable finale build-up. And yet, this wasn't the end. Not even close. Nobody noticed the street lights dim. Nobody noticed the crowd go silent all at once. But everyone noticed the moment Paris turned into a cathedral of light. As the orchestra tore through the final build-up, the plaza suddenly shifted. The giant mall behind the musicians, Galeries Lafayette, went completely dark. Not a single bulb, not a single Christmas ornament, not even the reflections on the glass remained. The entire world seemed to hold its breath. Then, light burst across the facade in a breathtaking wave. The whole building transformed into a massive glowing display, swirling snowflakes, cascading bells, ribbons of gold and sapphire spiraling upward. The visuals pulsed perfectly with the tempo, as if the building itself had joined the performance. People screamed in pure disbelief. A mother clutched her son, whispering, "This can't be real." Teenagers jumped up and down, crying, laughing, shouting. A tourist yelled, "Paris, what are you doing to me?" But the real shock came from above. Because out of nowhere, a full rooftop choir appeared. 50 singers lined across the edge of the building, holding flickering LED candles. Their silhouettes glowed against the night sky like angels descending into the city. With a soft gesture from the conductor, they began singing the highest, most delicate harmony of the entire composition. Their voices floated down like falling snow, drifting over the plaza in shimmering layers. The crowd went completely silent. 100 raised phones, but nobody spoke. It felt sacred. Then, the conductor lifted his baton one final time. Everything slowed. The strings softened into a trembling whisper. The brass lowered to a warm, golden hum. The rooftop choir sustained their glowing overtone. The musicians across the plaza leaned forward, ready. With a smooth, sweeping arc, the conductor delivered the final stroke. The entire ensemble, over 100 musicians, poured their souls into the last, explosive chord of Carol of the Bells. A blinding burst of gold light shot up the building, exploding into a fountain of sparkling flakes. The fireworks echoed through the city. The sound rippled off rooftops. People held their breath through the entire sustain. Then, silence. Stillness. A moment carved into history. And finally, the plaza erupted. Cheers. Screams. Applause that shook the ground. People hugged strangers. Kids danced. Older couples held hands. It wasn't just a flash mob. It was a memory Paris would never forget.